All right. I just wanted some clarification on some of these outstanding points when it comes to crossing the border. There's been a lot of, as I said before, apprehension, people thinking that they might be stopped or turned away. And if they're turned away in these times where border security has been heightened with the travel ban that Trump's imposed, he's updated on Monday, or just in general, people thinking they might get flagged, and what your rights or privileges are insofar as that's concerned. Because there was that case, and this was just brought up by Mary, who had called in a few moments ago, of a woman born and raised in Montreal to Indian parents, and she was stopped at the Vermont border. She was on her way to a spa with two friends, and they held her there for hours, and then she was told she needed a visa and was turned around. So what are the actual rules of engagement? And let's clear up some of these misperceptions, as it were. Cassandra Fultz has joined us on the line. Cassandra is a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. How's Cassandra this afternoon?
Cassandra is excellent. Thank you so much, John, for having me on your show. I've been a fan for a long time.
Well, I appreciate your saying that. So we're starting out on the right foot, Cassandra.
Absolutely.
Tell me, in this case, by the way, this is the celebrated one, and a caller just brought it up as well, the Montreal woman who was going to Vermont. It's raised a lot of implications that I guess she feels that she was somehow discriminated against, or they had picked on her specifically, even though she had, I guess, all her papers in order. What did you make of that case?
Well, I read the article on Global News, and it doesn't seem to point to any type of discrimination to me. It seems to me like an honest mistake, because no natural-born Canadian citizen should require a visitor visa to enter the United States. She had her Canadian passport. That should be sufficient.
But isn't it a case of they don't have to give an answer? They're border guards. That's the law, and they can impose it at will or whim, can't they?
That is correct. Basically, it is a privilege to enter the United States or any country that someone is not a national of. As a Canadian citizen, you are requesting admittance to the U.S., and they can accept or refuse your request.
Even with valid travel documents?
Of course. And it's the same for Canada. If you're an American citizen, when you come to the Canadian border, you're requesting to be admitted, and CBSA can certainly decline to admit you. It happens every day.
Hey, what do you make of this other individual, this Kazir Khan, the Gold Star father? Don't know if you follow that case, but it seems that he says he had to cancel a speaking engagement here in Toronto on Monday because his travel privileges were being vetted or scrutinized. I just didn't see that passing any kind of sniff test. What am I missing?
To be honest with you, I'm not familiar with that specific case. Was he a United States citizen?
Yes, he was. He was born in Pakistan, but for 30 years a Canadian citizen, or a U.S. citizen. But he did stand up during the Democratic Convention, and he pilloried Donald Trump.
Okay.
And so I guess now on the update of the travel imposition that Trump announced on Monday, this Mr. Khan decided that he was going to again surface and make a point.
In Canada.
Well, he was supposed to come to Canada, but he says he was not coming because his travel privileges were being scrutinized. Why would they be? He's an American citizen. He's got all
That's a good question. But basically, this is something that can happen to any American citizen, or as I said, any citizen of a country other than Canada. You're subject to inspection, and that's before you even get on the plane.
But he says the American authorities were scrutinizing him, not the Canadian ones. So I guess, you know what, that's just another country. I was curious if you knew anything more about that. But let me get back to the Canadian context where Canadians would be trying to cross into the U.S. of A. If you've got documents in order, but let's say a cell phone as well, can they go through your cell phone?
Absolutely. That's a great question, and they can definitely go through your cell phone. If you don't want your laptop computer, your cell phone examined, because that is part of inspection, then don't bring it with you.
I see. And let's say you've been doing the cross-border thing umpteen times a year for many, many years, and then suddenly you're stopped. I mean, I guess people have this false notion that, like a credit rating, you build up goodwill, and after they've got you tracked for so long, it's almost like rubber stamp, yeah, just go through, we recognize you. That isn't the case, is it?
It's definitely not the case, and that happens all the time. Sometimes they have what's called data dumps, where someone, for example, has let's say a criminal charge from a long, long, long time ago. That still makes someone inadmissible to the United States. but all of a sudden it's a problem. They've been crossing the border for years and years and never had any issue. But then today they're just going to Buffalo to go shopping and they don't get let in. That happens every day because that person is still inadmissible. They can do different levels of background checks whenever you're crossing the border, and it can just so happen that you got caught today. So it's really common, and it's very common coming into Canada for United States citizens as well.
Does a
I
pardon?
do a lot of work in that area.
Do you? Well, does a pardon expunge your record so that they don't know that you might have had a criminal violation many, many moons ago?
Absolutely not in the United States. According to U.S. law, you still are required to have a waiver to enter the U.S. if you have a criminal conviction.
How difficult is it to secure a waiver? What's the protocol?
So it's actually not as hard as it is to get sort of the equivalent in Canada. Waivers are, I don't want to say they're easy to come by, but if you can make the case convincingly that you are rehabilitated, that you have no problem, you're not going to reoffend, that you're not going to cause any issues when you're in the United States, that you have ties to Canada, you're obviously going to return to Canada, then it shouldn't be an issue for you to have a waiver application approved.
Cassandra, what's the deal?
Common.
Now, if they do refuse you, is that a stain or a blot on your record that you can't get back in for 5 years? Is there a finite time window on that?
So if you do get refused entry to the United States, it depends on the reason that you get refused, okay?
And do they tell you the reason, though? Can you find out the reason?
Absolutely, they have to. Yes, if they refuse you entry, they'll actually, you have to go to secondary inspection if there's an issue. They don't refuse you entry in your car at the border. They'll send you to secondary and they'll issue you documents explaining why you have been refused. You have to answer questions. You have to acknowledge in writing that you understand why you've been refused, and they'll give you documentation. And actually, the Customs and Border Protection officers are usually very helpful. They'll even explain to you, you need a waiver. This is the form number. This is where you find it. This is how you file the application. It's scary and it's inconvenient, but they're doing the best they can with that.
And I'm sure there are occasions where it's just you got the wrong person screening on the wrong day, or they're having a bad day, and it just
I don't want to say that it's that arbitrary because the officers are very highly trained. They know what to look for, and they're not looking to mess anybody over. Certainly not. But what they are looking to do is protect hundreds of millions of people.
Well, sure. That's all part of Homeland Security, and we know that got beefed up after 9/11. And so if they get granular and start asking you about religion and if you've ever been to certain countries and, maybe had seen some military operations or even sexual orientation, can they drill down on you that specifically?
Well, what I would say is they can ask anything that they want. It's at their discretion what line of questioning to use. However, it's easy for them to determine what's appropriate and what's not. And they're highly trained, like I said. They're not going to ask questions that are irrelevant to the inspection because there is recourse. If you have a problem at the border, if you think you've been treated unfairly or you think you've been discriminated against, you can file a complaint with CBP, with Customs and Border Protection, and you can even do a verbal complaint with a supervisor. So this will get back to them if they have behaved inappropriately.
All right. Are you getting, this is the last question, any reports of people finding that they're more stringently screened these days? Has the ante been upped, so to speak, in the last month or two?
I don't think so. Not in my experience. I've seen a lot of hype. There's a lot of news stories surrounding this, but to me, this is business as usual. People that are getting refused, they're the same kind of cases that get refused every day. So I don't really think so.
I really appreciate your time today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
You got it. We'll have to talk again sometime.
Sounds great.
There you go. Cassandra Fultz is a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. Well, what's your experience at the border? Let's keep that one going. 870-6400 if you wanted to weigh in based on maybe you've been passed or not passed through. They've stopped you and turned you around. We'll hear those stories in a moment. 870-6400, star 640 on cell.